So I welcome you all here to our Whanganui Rural Community Board meeting. And we will start with Judd and the karakia.
Kia ora koe, Mr. Chairman. Karakia wa karakia. Kia uru mai, aho ora, aho kaha, aho maia, ki runga, ki raro, ki waho, reri reri, hau pai mari e. Fill me with vitality, strength, bravery, above, below, inwards and outwards. Let the wind blow, peace be upon you. Kia ora tata.
Thank you, Judd. Do we have any apologies? I have one from Brian Doughty.
Okay, oh, that's right.
And we're all, we're just waiting for Deputy Mayor Helen. I imagine she's probably not far away. So, the Whanganui Rural Community Board accepts the apology from Brian Doughty. I'll move it. Seconder. Thank you, Grant. Declarations of interest?
Oh, carried.
Oh, carried. Yep.
Thank you.
Declarations of interest, anyone?
Yeah, I'm always interested.
Thank you, Peter.
Oh, we're simply not going to be able to get rid of you. And it's in the agenda in a few minutes, but I would also like to welcome Deputy Mayor Helen to our first meeting. Thank you, Helen. Okay, presumably we've all had a chance. Oh, have we? We don't have to.
Yeah,
We're on to the minutes now.
yes, please.
So presumably we've all had a look at the minutes. Can I have a mover and a seconder for confirming the minutes? No, you can't move it yet.
Yes.
You've opted out.
I was there.
Well, technically, we haven't done the formal swap over yet.
Oh, okay. Right, yeah, no, good idea. We'll get you on the sheet then, Peter.
Sure.
Yep. Okay, Peter and Michael. So,
All in favour?
so we have to vote on that, don't we? Mm-hmm. So all in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you. So the next item is 6.1 Community Partners Report. And we have Joe Seddon from Chorus. And you've driven here from Wellington, have you?
Oh, my mistake. Far away.
So thank you very much for making the effort, Joe.
That's all right. I wasn't convinced that Zoom was going to work on my computer, so it was much easier to get in the car and drive.
Yes. Oh, well,
Flicker, Rachel.
most appreciated, thank you.
Oh, they won't, because we're on camera.
Oh, yeah.
So I did send round, you probably haven't had a look, but Joe sent a lot of information which I was particularly interested in. So I did send it to you all, but if you hadn't seen it, she's probably going to update us all on it anyway.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a pack that I've sent through, but mainly what I'm here to talk about is the closing down, the retirement of our country radio set equipment out in the more remote areas. So what that is, it's called CMAR, and don't ask me what that stands for, but it's where we beam the signal to a tower and then it goes out from there out across a copper network to more remote areas around the country. So what's happened is the equipment is ageing. It's been in place for a very long time. Oh, thank you.
Through your slides if you want to.
Oh, look at that. Magic. It's breaking down and we can't source parts for it. Also, our techs are retiring and we no longer have techs that are training in the copper network because we've got better technologies available, including fibre. So that's basically it in a nutshell. We've kind of, there's more in the slides here, but I don't know if you can see them terribly well. So what we're going to be doing is retiring that copper network, but ultimately all of our copper network will be retired by the end of the decade. So by 2030, all of our copper network throughout New Zealand will have reached the end. So when we retire the equipment, it doesn't mean the end of the landline if people still want a voice service. So just to be clear, that country radio equipment only does voice. It doesn't do broadband. It only does voice services. So we're talking landlines. So it doesn't mean the end of the landline. We can get voice over internet now. So myself, I'm on what's called a wireless internet service provider, a WISP. My local provider is Wiz Wireless. I'm not actually connected to a fixed line, but I can work from home and I have a landline which works over that internet connection, which goes from point to point directly from Wiz Wireless equipment. So people can still have a landline. It works over Starlink. They just need a little box that connects them up. If you see that little box to the right of their telephone, that plugs into their Starlink, and then that provides a voice service if that's what they still want.
We have a WISP that does most of our rural areas in SpireNet.
InspireNet, yeah, they do a lot of work around here in Manawa too, don't they? Yep. I'll just be clear here too, you probably are aware, but we don't have a fibre network here in Whanganui. It's a different provider, so it's not a chorus network. So when we talk about retiring our copper, that will be putting people onto the local fibre network rather than our own. You can read through these, but feel free to ask any questions as we go through. So a fallacy out there is that if people have a copper landline and they pick it up during a power cut, their copper landline is still going to work. Well, the chances are it won't, because all telecommunications needs power nowadays. So it might work for a short time, but when the batteries run out in the exchange or the local cabinet or up at the equipment on the top of the hill, then there's going to be no connectivity anyway. So what we say to people is be prepared. Think about what you need to do to get prepared for any type of power outage. Myself, I've got a solar charging little unit that I bought from Dick Smith, $245. And it will give me 4 hours of plugging my modem and everything in so I can continue working if there's an outage.
So those roadside boxes,
Yep.
they've got, the reason up until recently we had power on the landline was that they've got batteries.
Yeah, so they've got batteries that last for about 4 hours in them. At that point we then have to either plug in a generator or hope that the power's come back on. Otherwise they'll be out. So when Cyclone Gabrielle came through on the east coast, power was the big problem for us. Once the power came back on, most of the fibre network lit right back up again. But our copper network did not, because a lot of those cabinets were damaged in the floods. So yeah, fibre's more resilient than the copper. Yep.
From the WISP networks, you're very reliant on equipment on tops of hills again, and therefore very vulnerable with that scenario. Would you like to comment on where that is going and what you're recommending to back that up?
Well, we're not recommending any service over another. What we're saying is people need to look at what works best for them and make a decision about that. So if we go through the process of shutting down retiring the network, so by the 31st of March we will have retired the country set and radio network throughout New Zealand. So what will happen is very soon all people who are on it, so those who are directly affected, will get a letter from Chorus saying, we are going to retire the equipment that is feeding your landline. You need to think about what other service you want to get. So at that point, they need to look at what they're going to do. Then in 2 months after that, they'll get another letter if they haven't made a transition. Then they'll get another letter, and then we will door knock them if we have to, if they haven't made that transition, and go and talk to them about what is it that they are is holding them back, and help them make that transition onto something else. So it could be a WISP, it could be satellite, it could be whatever they choose, but we can't comment on WISP equipment because we don't own it.
Yeah, just from a power backup perspective,
Well-
you would be relying on their networks.
I
as
would,
well.
I would assume that your local WISP would have their own power backups. I mean, I know that Wiz Wireless, a lot of theirs is solar, and they're more remote sites. So you just like you would with Spark or Vodafone or any of the other providers, they would have to be making sure that they got power to their sites.
So presumably we're not talking very many people here because this service only provides a landline.
Yeah.
And I don't, we discuss this quite often, we don't think there's many people without internet. So
No.
if you've already got internet, it should be very simple to switch over to the
So-
phone. Although the people I have talked to have said that they have kept landlines because they work when the power goes off.
Yeah, but they don't.
But now
so
they
that's
won't.
the fallacy. Unfortunately, if they're relying on it working, they may find that it's not working when they need it because it requires power. If the cabinet's not working or the radio site's not working, they don't have a landline.
But presumably these radio ones, there's no power associated with them anyway.
Yeah, there is. There's power at the sites, but often they are in remote areas where we have an agreement with a landowner, so it's reliant on the landowner having power, or they're a solar one with batteries.
Okay.
And if those fail, then, like we had one on Great Barrier recently where the generator, there was a fault in the generator switch and it didn't kick in, and so the batteries died and we had to get a tech out there to replace the switch that kicked in the generator. If I skip across, I've told you the reasons for retiring anyway, but you can, but there, that's got the numbers in Whanganui. So we've got 44 addresses, which are basically 44 properties with 48 lines. So sometimes a farm might have 2 phone lines going in for whatever reason. There might be 2 cottages or something on that one property. So we're talking 44 people in the whole of the Whanganui district, and it may be even less because actually we're getting natural churn as people come off their landline and go on to satellite. So that's the numbers. Around 1,800 around the country. The majority are in the Marlborough Sound and Ruapehu district. So I've kind of touched on that. That's the process that we're going through, where we're going to send out letters and we will engage with people directly. So what we're saying to people is, if you don't hear directly from Chorus, then you're not affected at this stage. So you don't have to worry. You're not losing your landline at this point. But by 2030, we will have retired all the copper network throughout the country. So it says there that the first notice has gone out. It hasn't actually gone out yet because the Ministry of MB are wanting a bit more information, so they want us to include a survey in the letters that we send out, but that's mainly to gather information for them, like how many people still have a fax line, that sort of information. So we're going to include that in the letters to help them gather that, which people can then either choose to fill in or not. So we're just waiting for them to finalise that, and then we'll send the first lot of letters out. Oops. So I guess the next, are there any questions on that? So the idea is that we're not going to leave anybody behind. No one will be left without any service. When we do the switch off on the 31st of March, it will be what's called a soft switch off. So what will happen is we will turn all the equipment off. If somebody comes to us and they haven't made that transition yet, or for some reason they need to get a landline back on, we can switch it back on within 10 days of that switch off. Just, we're having that buffer time just so that we really don't leave anybody without some form of connectivity. No questions? So I guess the next bit is about more about actually getting fibre out to and the importance of connectivity for subdivisions. So we're advocating that all subdivisions should have a fixed line component to consenting, because we know that if you want to retrospectively fit in a fixed line after everything's done, then it's a lot more difficult and a lot more costly. So when the subdividers are putting in the trenches for power and septics and water, we're saying they should put in a duct for telecommunications at the same time. Basically, that's because fibre is an open access network, so that includes the fibre service that you have here in Whanganui. Open access means that there are a great deal of providers on that network, so people can actually choose which provider they want to go with, so they can get the best plan that's available for them. Whereas if it's on a fixed wireless or a wireless service, you're often locked into only one provider and the plans that they offer. So anyway, our planners wanted us to include this so that you can perhaps think about what's working in your district.
So there's still competition from satellite, of course.
Yeah, there is. I mean, but if it's a requirement to have the fixed line, then people can choose. They can still go on to satellite if that's what they want to do, but they can also have a fixed line service if that's what they want. But if you don't have that, they have no choice.
Yes.
So that's kind of more information on that as well. So here, it again goes over why we think that it should be done at the time of the development. So probably.
So can I just ask you, so have you advised all councils about that suggestion?
Yes, yep. So I do a regular update to mayors and community board chairs about once every quarter, and the last two, I think, have included information about open access networks. We're also going to be at the local government conference next week, where we're hoping to talk to people about the importance of it.
Yeah.
Because we actually do believe that it's really, really important. And the further out you go with your subdivisions, the closer fibre gets to people who are more outlying. So it's cheaper to get fibre to them.
Absolutely. I think it's a really good suggestion. I'm just hoping that so I guess one action plan would be that we just advise the senior manager in charge of all this of our suggestion to support that they bring that into their rules, something to that effect.
And I think the reason Joe's here is I get that email she's talking about,
Yeah.
and I was particularly interested in that, in the rural thing. So that's
Yeah, I get that. It has to actually get down to the
yes.
to the officers who draw up the plans, right,
Yes.
and do just because we're going to do a big district plan review,
Yeah,
which I'm guessing where this will.
and that's where it's important, is when you're doing your district plan.
Do you think it might be an idea do you think there's someone else in this organisation that should be getting that email she's talking about? That's the chief executive or the...
I can get our planner who is managing this to talk to whoever you need him to talk to, because he's quite passionate about it.
Yeah, it would be, who's the senior manager in charge of planning? Justin? Yeah. Yeah, Justin Waters.
Excuse me, Chair, can I just ask a question?
Certainly.
I'm just wondering if you'd like us to start like a little action log, so as things pop up, we can note them down, if that's what you'd like. Okay.
It'd be part of the minutes, wouldn't it?
Not so much part of the minutes, but it's sort of what we do alongside the committees. Is if when things come up that are non-resolution actions,
Yeah.
we just note them down for,
Action.
yeah.
That'd be great. Sorry, Mr. Chair, that would be great. Be the chair.
So I think at present, Whanganui has, it's a control or discretionary activity, so that means that it's up to the council to decide whether or not it's a requirement, whereas we think it should actually just be a requirement. And that's more in the rural areas, same thing. At the moment, your district plan doesn't require it, but we think it should. For all of the reasons that in the previous slides we can go over, but mainly it's that open access and the fact that actually people have a choice. And we know that the way things are going, who would have thought 20 years ago that we were so dependent on the internet? But now we're looking at, there's a shortage of doctors throughout the country. There's all sorts of things where telehealth is going to be really important. We've already got banking and everything else. All our government services are basically online. So if you don't have good connectivity, then you're already immediately hamstrung. Also working from home, I can vouch, it's very important. That's kind of it, really. There's an appendix at the end which has all the legal, more involved stuff that was lots and lots of words from our subdivision people about why open access is important. Feel free to read it if you are so inclined.
So I've got a question. Why, when I drive to town sometimes, I see two vans parked outside one of your roadside boxes, clearly fixing problems, and I know that there's only a handful of people actually using the service provided by those boxes, which seems to me a huge waste of resources. Why can't we look at being a bit more efficient and getting rid of those boxes before 2030?
Well, ideally we'd love to. If you can get people off the copper network and onto an alternative.
You have the numbers of people still using that service?
In Whanganui, I can certainly find out the number of landlines. Yep.
Because if you're going to be saving money, then there might be an opportunity to use some of those savings to help those people change. And I'm thinking mainly in terms of backup power.
Yeah, also we have identified there are about 300 smaller communities around the country that we could actually get fibre to fairly easily with a bit of support from government. And that doesn't even necessarily mean money, it can just mean a change of settings, because Chorus is a regulated company, and so there are lots of restrictions on us on what we can and can't do. So if some of that is eased up, there's about 300 areas around New Zealand that we can extend fibre to and get better broadband to. So yeah, making cost savings will make it easier for us to extend our fibre network.
If you can think of any way that we could assist in that process, it's something I'm quite keen on.
Yeah, yeah.
And as I say, most of the people who are still on landlines, they say, oh, it works when the power's off.
And that's the mind shift that we need. Yeah,
clearly not the case.
We've got we've produced our own pamphlet on how to prepare for a power outage, because actually if you go online, it talks about keeping your freezer running and things for a major, what to do if the power goes down for a few hours, but actually there's nothing in there about telecommunications. So we've produced our own. So I think I may have sent it to you, but if not, then I will.
Perhaps if you could send it again, and then we can,
Yep.
I can just make sure and send it out to everybody.
And there's also the one on voice options, on voice calling. So a lot of people aren't
You
aware.
definitely sent that one.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't aware of Wi-Fi calling. So at the moment where I live, I don't have connectivity for 2 Degrees, which is the network that that Chorus runs its mobile phones on. So what I have is Wi-Fi calling, where my phone connects to my internet connection, and that gives me exactly what I would if it was operating off a cell tower. But worth noting is that any charges for data or anything come off your phone plan, not your internet plan. So people need to realise that although that it's working over the internet for the connection, your charges will be on whatever phone plan that you've got with your mobile.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that for a little while either. But yeah, it was pointed out by one of our tech guys.
Thank you. Ross?
Thank you, Chair. And through the Chair, technology. Just help me out with this. Our population's about 48,700. About 20% of our people are rural. We're quite a large region. From an earlier slide, and I think it was talking about rural people, only about 44 to 48 people are left to make this transfer. Is that right?
No, those are people who are still on the remote country radio sets, not on the copper network.
Okay, so
they're on that radio equipment that we're going to be shutting down.
Do you have any way of knowing or indicating how many of our rural-based people are still on copper line?
I could probably find out. So you want to know how many are still on copper. and how many are on copper outside of the fibre footprint that you've already
Yes.
got. Yep, I can do that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I can do that.
And then the comforting part of that was you said you started rolling out the letters and there'll be more. And so there's various stages where you step in and say, look, you still haven't done the conversion. I won't say conversion therapy, but you haven't converted yet to fibre. Sorry about that. The reason I say that as a question is, and I'm not trying to stereotype it, but I'm formerly from with Grey Power, and sometimes the older you get, this is too much to
Yeah.
understand and follow.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that the support is there other than just a letter. There's someone talking to you and saying, I suggest we do this for you.
Yeah, so that letter will include an 0800 number which goes to our dedicated people in Auckland who will talk them through it. We've also got what we call regional managers who can come out and actually talk to them in person. So, and if required, we're happy to hold a community meeting if you think that that will help. You know, what we want to do is actually make this as smooth for people as possible. And we know that it can be scary, particularly for older people. But once it's all set up, they won't notice any difference. There will be a dial tone. They will ring out exactly the same way on their phone as they have done always. It's just a different technology that's going to provide that link to the world. So we're more than happy to go and talk to people, and we're happy to talk to Grey Power if they want, you know, anyone actually that wants us to.
And that would include coming out to a marae.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we know it can be scary. My husband's, I mean, he's 74 and he's my litmus test. We've still got a landline and we get scammers and telemarketers and they're the only people that ring us on the landline. But we have to have that because he's got this idea that it works in an emergency, even though I work for Chorus and I've explained to him many times that it won't. He still believes it will, so we have to have the landline.
Okay.
So, yeah, I understand the difficulties in getting people a level of comfort that they can make that change.
Okay, thank you. As I say, I'm keen to. I think we should be getting rid of that before 2030. And if our board can be of any assistance in the things that you've just mentioned, helping people make the change, we would be very pleased to consider it.
Thank you so much for that.
And if that's all for the questions, I'd just like to thank you very much for making the journey over here and bringing us up to date on this issue.
Thank you. It was lovely anyway. I caught up with Anique from the council who I do the cabinet art with. So we do the murals on the cabinets around. So I work with her. So it was nice to see her in person rather than just on a Skype call.
Okay.
Thanks everybody. I hope it wasn't too garbled, but you've got the pack and it's got my contact details. So feel free to contact me at any time if you want to talk through anything else. And I will find out that information for you and get it back to you. And I may see you at the Community Boards Conference next week, maybe,
Yes,
if you're going.
Judd here is going to that.
Right, well, we'll have a stand in the main area downstairs, but we're also a sponsor of the Community Boards Conference, so we'll also be at the dinner and hopefully sitting in on some of the sessions as well.
Come and annoy you.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Colleen.
Thank you.
Very interesting because I'm on the Rural Women New Zealand paper for business and connectivity.
Oh, I work with Kelly from Rural Women.
Oh, you want me to over there?
I work with Kelly from Rural Women, so yeah, we're quite involved with them.
Yeah, cool.
Great, thank you.
Happy travels home, Joe.
Thank you.
Safe trip.
Rightio, that's
Okay,
on.
Colleen, been a few changes in the way you operate, and you've been to Australia and done all sorts of things since we saw you last time.
I know, and we're now part of council, so...
Oh, and Ireland.
oh,
Chair,
yes.
can I just ask a quick question? Some of us are double booked
Yes.
for 4 o'clock. So are we tracking to hopefully finish?
So we've got 2:45. We need, so we're going to hear from Colleen now, and then we've got to deal with the housekeeping of changing board members, and then at 2:45 we've got Sarah O'Hagan, and after that Caroline Arrowsmith. So it'd be good if we could all be here for Sarah O'Hagan.
So you're hoping to finish at 3:30 or 4?
3:30 is.
3:30.
I'd be very pleased to be finished by 3:30.
Thank you, Chair.
That's okay. I'll be very pleased to get through this in a short time. And sorry for the verbal report. I didn't actually write a more formal one, and I will do for your next meeting. So just stuff that we've been carrying on with and developing. So we are, in terms of the emission reduction plan that has come out, the Plan 2 consultation, Whanganui and Partners will be writing their own separate high-level submission, and we have sent supporting information to Whanganui District Council for their submission. I mean, I know we were part of it, but under an economic development sort of lens, we introduced some stuff that was not seen as sitting with local government. So, and those things were, coming from an agribusiness point of view, was the actual calculation of carbon accounting and how could embodied carbon, soil carbon or biochar be included to actually then get a good idea of what carbon was sequestered. Therefore, would that assist in the reduction plan and actually having the right numbers. These are things that are included in emissions trading schemes overseas, or the way they carbon account. It's just not counted in New Zealand. And part of that was the fact that at the moment it looks like exotic forest is the way that the current consultation wants to go, although they did in their consultation questions asked about other opportunities. So that's where we see an opportunity to also do a submission. And you'll hear more from Caroline on the WDC submission later in the day.
So just you are submitting
Separately.
separately.
Yeah, to include the other opportunities to account for sequestration that might not have been included in, for instance, the local government submission or the WDC submission.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We have two master's students, two Massey master's students who are working on a Whanganui food tech project. It's really important, and the relationship that we have with the Massey School of Food and Advanced Technology means that they can ring up the phone and say, "Hey, have you got a crop grower or a business that's looking to maybe do some value adding, do some something that's a commodity that can actually be turned into a higher value product?" And lo and behold, I did. So I won't tell you who it is, but I'm really pleased that these Massey students are working with them and may come up with a product that straight out of Whanganui from crops grown here. We've also got investors looking to place high value cover crops for trial in Whanganui. So this is the type of stuff that when you're doing agribusiness and economic development, people approach you to do some really cool things. They don't come asking for money; they just come up asking for connections, and that's what we do really well. We are also we do have the support of Massey Business School, who are keen to use their 300 intern paper to put people in Whanganui to partner with business that, and I use the idea of, and this isn't agribusiness, but for instance, IT people that like they invent some app or they invent something, and they might be really, really good IT-wise at doing their stuff, like a normal person couldn't, but they just don't know how to market or take that to commercial aspects. So the business school is willing to put their 300 level interns to actually partner with these people to then write a report on how they might be able to do their thing. So it actually might take that business forward a lot faster than it would if they were trying to do it on their own. And it's also one thing that I've always looked at, that funding is available through regional business partners for a business to then go and to have half their course costs to go and learn about marketing. It's like me looking at calculus. You know, you can pay whatever money, I'm still not going to get it. And there's some people like that that are IT, that are very, you know, focused on whatever they're developing, but try and get them to learn about marketing or business, and it's just not in their realm of.
Are you looking
even
at
wanting
placements for internships?
What's that?
Are you looking at internships, placements?
So
for-
yeah, Massey Business
Cool.
School. It's a 115389 paper. So 389 being the 300 level, and they place their business school students into internships. It's not for them to actually sit there and work in the business. It's actually to work on a project. For instance, it could be commerciality or marketing or something in the business realm that that our local businesses might not have had access to, or be able to get that understanding. So it's actually a really good opportunity.
How would our rural community that has an idea for businesses tap into this resource?
Well, come and see me.
Come and see
Tell
you?
me what. Yeah. I did actually a couple of years ago. We partnered a Māori agribusiness student who was doing that paper with a Māori agribusiness here in Whanganui.
Oh.
Yeah. So, yep. And they were
Excellent.
able to give them really good understanding of the business they were running, the different areas of funding that they might have had and partnership to run their business, and also how they could look at different ways of approaching things. Yep.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so that was good. We're also looking to embark on understanding export movements. So whether that's exporting by truck, port, airport, understanding who in Whanganui actually exports. And I don't mean export just domestically, I actually mean what's their final destination. And on the other side, also looking at where imports in the country of origin are coming from when they're coming into Whanganui. And part of that is to understand the landscape of what things we have in place now, what might be needed for the future in terms of those export movements and the supply chain that's required. So that's something that's going to be coming up. As the chair mentioned, I did go on a 5-day trip to Toowoomba, and that was which is our sister city. So Toowoomba and Western Downs, which is about an hour outside of Toowoomba, and took a agricultural delegation. So before you get worried, they all paid their own way, and we went and saw a whole lot of agribusiness, huge feedlots, which you just wouldn't get away with in New Zealand, actually. No one looking at the ground and going, you'll never grow a blade of grass there. It was actually these people were running 20,000 stock units at a feedlot. Really interesting. And the value that brought in terms of exporting directly through having an airport very close by. There was also a lot of value add, so breakfast cereals, grains being made into whether it was waffles, pancakes, the actual cereals, and working together, contracting other grain growers to do those sort of things, even right through to going to a bone broth factory, and that they're getting all the bones from all around the country. And what they were doing with that and what products they were making. So it was really it was more than just one product. So I suppose that's why I get excited about Massey approaching us with 2 master students to look at how they can value add a commodity, because that is going to bring value to Whanganui. Right, and I caught up with MPI. They are focused on catchment groups quite intentionally, and there is funding from government going into catchment groups and building that, so they have a better idea of, I suppose, environmental outcomes as well, looking from a catchment base rather than individually from each individual farm. So that was quite good, and they're also supporting Rural Support Trust and rural communities during emergencies, so they're building up that database in terms of being more connected with emergency management. And then that is pretty much it so open to questions, thank you.
Thank you, Colin. You know,
Did I overwhelm you?
that's great, thank you. I got some, a bit of feedback on on your Australian trip. You obviously got a couple of people thinking about a few issues, so it sounded like that's, it was good to get some positive feedback on it anyway.
Oh, good. You know, it was really good. Every time we came out of somewhere, they just kept saying, oh, we're just small fry, aren't we? Collaboration is the key in terms of more farmers collaborating to actually have a product that's, you know, bigger than Australia, really.
Okay, well, that's very good, thank you, Colin, because we haven't actually heard from you for a while, so that's
Yeah, and as I said,
and
at
of
the
course
next,
you're working from council now, and you've got changes to the way you're all working, and
yeah, learning all the new systems. But yeah, so I'll have a report, a proper report to your next meeting, and it'll have a tour report in there.
thank you very
Can
much.
I ask something?
Certainly.
So Colin's just presented to us, which was really great, a lot of going on there. I'm just wondering if there's any other insights she's got generally, since she's on about the work that we are doing here, the Whanganui Rural Community Board, in any way that we can help what you do or get the message out in any way to the rural community, or, you know, what could we be doing differently or additionally or anything?
Well,
I'm just
that's
wondering.
We're going to meet informally, workshop type thing, well, one of these meetings every second month, and an informal workshop every second month.
Right.
So if you can get onto us, we'd be very pleased to include you in that informal workshop, because we get more of an opportunity to discuss these things in depth.
Yeah, that'll be a
That'd be
good
great.
opportunity. Yep.
And we'll, the democracy people, I'll get them to let you know when we are having those
Thanks.
that other meeting.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Colleen.
Great.
Before you go, just a great presentation. Would you be available to come to a community group meeting and just talk about what you see as positives for the rural community and investment and marketing?
Sure, I can. If it
Yep.
fits with my diary,
fits
which
with
I
your
can
time,
now
yep,
get on
yep.
my phone and on my computer.
Excellent, excellent. We'll tee you up for one. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Yes. That's why the workshop type one every other month, we're hoping to have it in one of the one of the smaller rooms. Yes. Yes.
We could even have this meeting in there, could we?
We could. We used to.
Oh, of course we're live streaming. Sorry to those people who couldn't hear that. We were I was just discussing whether we could have a smaller room, because this is it feels really weird.
Yes.
The speakers sort of feel like a million miles away,
Yes.
but that's okay, we'll cope.
Yes.
We need to get more public in here. Yeah. Rent a crowd. Yeah. Make the circle smaller. Anyway, I'll stop waffling. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a recommendation here. So we need a mover and seconder for the Whanganui Rural Community Board receive the report community partners report. So a mover, Helen, a seconder, yes. Judd? Yep. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you. So we're going to move on to item 6.2, which is a membership of our board. And Councillor Peter Oscombe has tendered his resignation as councillor representative on our board. And Council on the 16th of July appointed Deputy Mayor Helen Craig as his successor. And so I'd just like to thank Helen for making herself available for that.
My pleasure.
And thank Peter very much for his time on the board, because he was chair of it for a while, and then when he was a councillor, he stayed on. So thank you.
Going downhill from there.
So I'd like to move a formal thanks to Peter, because it is an extra commitment to do this role.
Yes.
And he's had a long-term involvement with the Rural Community Board, which has been really valuable, and it is appreciated, Peter. So, yeah, thank you for all your time
Absolutely.
and commitment.
Thank you. And I suspect he may turn up anyway.
And he'll still keep turning up.
He never ever bought the biscuits, though, did he?
And we will note that formally in the minutes.
So what's the process here? It's already been done, so we're just approving that
Yeah,
recommendation.
it's just an information point, that was my mistake earlier. So
Yep.
just a mover and a seconder.
Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder for the report on the membership update as outlined here. So Grant and Michael, so all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
You can leave now,
Even computer.
You've just got the temperature more pleasant, he won't want to now.
I just won't stop giving you stick.
I hope that doesn't stop.
So we're going to move on to the, have we got Sarah here? Or someone filling in? You, okay, thank you. So item 6.3 is the recycling, which has been taking up a bit of councillor time recently. I understand the new service is going very well, but there's one area where it's been contentious, and my view is that our board should be getting involved in sorting out what options the rural community may want and what council can provide. So I'm looking forward on that one. But it would be quite good if we could all be updated on the situation that from the Aramo area. So, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Morgan Harrison. I'm the Manager of Waste Services. This is week 7, I think. So I arrived a week before Curbside started, but just to give you a rundown, so last week at the Operations and Performance Committee, Mrs Barbara Gray presented a petition on behalf of residents on Papaiti and Waireka roads. Following that, we have reached out to all rated properties that are receiving a service on those 2 roads, and we have asked them for their feedback. The time frame to provide that is by no later than Wednesday next week, and on the 3rd of September council meeting we'll be providing a report to elected members to make a decision on the service there.
Sarah, would you like to
Thank you,
us on-
and sorry I was running late. I've just actually come back from the Resource Recovery Centre for a site visit, a health and safety site visit with our Chief Executive, so that was rather enlightening, and our new team leader showed us around there. So the rest of the paper for the board today was to talk about the how we've arrived at where we've arrived at with respect to the curbside service in the district, and paying particular attention to the questions that have come up from parts of the rural community, primarily Papaiti and Waireki Road group that Morgan's just mentioned, and prior to that, the group out at Dickens Lane in Pickwick that was generated through Mr. Bill Simmons. So the paper just summarised our approach to our consultation, which can be summarised as follow in its simplest form, that we came up with a proposal for a curbside service that fell out of the waste minimisation plan work and consultation process that was ran a number of years ago. We consulted district-wide on that proposal, and there were submissions and responses through that consultation process from both the rural parts of our community and the residential parts of our community. And as a result of that consultation, we adjusted the proposal. and have rolled out the service as we have rolled out the service from the 1st of July.
So it's on the basis of that consultation that Fordell and Mofanau were in,
Yes.
those two places were included.
So we adjusted the proposal based on consultation, on the engagement process that we went through, to respond to some of the questions that have come to officers from parts of the rural community and the elected members that were present at through the long-term plan submission process and the Ops and Performance Committee last week, a number of the people in those communities have talked about rural zones and residential zones. The service wasn't designed based on the zoning rules that sit within the RMA. The service area was based on a number of features or factors, including things like, and they're listed in the report, including things like, is there a service, a wheelie bin service, rubbish collection service in the area now, or in the street now, or road now? Can vehicles easily access the properties in those areas? Critical mass was an important factor. You know, if we just went here, would we bring in how many extra households? And that's about the limit or the extent of the factors. So the determination for the service area wasn't based on zoning. It was based on those other features to ensure that we had the best.
And what's not is irrelevant.
Pardon me?
The actual border between where rural start, it's not significant really where urban ends and rural starts.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Because obviously that is easily defined because we're only voted for by people in rural. So obviously you do have that clear demarcation, but that's simply not relevant to the situation.
No. So zones weren't relevant. I mean, there are some parts of our district that are in. We touch a number of zones through the service. Yeah. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to add based on the paper that we put through?
I think you covered it.
Did you have any comments or questions?
Any questions yet?
Sarah, thanks for that. I just want you to clarify a little bit the adjustments you made to the service following consultation. Is it true that essentially it was people opting in rather than allowing an opt-out by adding Fordell and Mawhanau, for example? I'm not saying that people should be allowed to have, but were there any adjustments for people opting out?
No. Opting in and opting out is not a principle that we've been using
I'm
through
talking about areas rather than individuals.
So the change that was taken following consultation was taken because we got feedback.
Yes.
And council made a decision following that consultation to include those areas.
Okay. So I guess I'm asking, did areas realise that they were part of it and asked by an area to be opt out? Were there any scenarios?
No, not that I'm aware. I don't think that happened.
Thank you.
We're very happy at Marybank. Thank you very much.
So are you in? Ross.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you through the chair. For clarification, at the end of that presentation by a rural person, I don't like using names, but a rural person, the mayor asked specifically to that resident, is your concern more about consultation as opposed to being opposed to the recycle service? And the petitioner was asked twice about it and seemed to have confirmed that the level of consultation was insufficient, which leads to my question, and that is, when you presented a few moments ago and you said officers are going to reach out to those residents in those 2 streets and then there'll be a decision on September the 3rd, is it appropriate for me to ask, is that reaching out the consultation that they feel they've missed out on?
I can answer that. I think the purpose of us surveying the 55, 54 households in those 2 roads was in direct response to receiving the petition, not to fill in a gap that the consultation had potentially in their minds created. So it was just a recheck in with that part of the community, and we're getting results back in that are the same as the results that we got back through the consultation process, which was some people want it and some people don't. So we're not actually hearing things that we haven't heard before through that process. And Stu's got something
between
to
now
add.
and September 3rd, what you're saying is we haven't committed to a full consultation process. We've committed to a survey of participation. Thank you. And my last question is on page 17. Sarah, when you talked about the service area is not defined on zoning from the Resource Management Act, and yet the initial material that went out 2 years ago nearly, I think over 2 years ago, it used terms like rural and urban, but it didn't specifically say not defined by zoning. But the language seemed to indicate a separation between urban and rural. And I'm not asking you to confirm, that may have led to confusion, but I'm saying the language used in the consultation process of urban and rural is different to my very first contact with this reference. I've not come across it before, that it says it wasn't based on, the service area is not defined based on zoning from the resource management. In other words, the whole area was up for consideration. So I'm just wondering, am I not understanding what you're saying about the Resource Management Act versus urban and rural referencing in the consultation process?
I'm not sure what your question is. Sorry, Ross, but
okay.
The point that I was trying to make there, or that we were trying to make there, is that there are clear boundaries with respect to the Resource Management Act and our district plan, in fact, around zones. The service area for the service wasn't defined by that. That's what we're trying to articulate.
Right. So in another way, now I can get my thoughts together a little bit better. What we are really saying is the whole area that was available was up for grabs, but we as a council defined where we were going to go initially.
We didn't define.
We defined it as the town, we defined it as Mofanau, we defined it as Fordale, and we included Marybank. So we actually, as a council, set where we were going to go with this service. We could have gone further, like Mangamahu or whatever, but we chose not to. Would that be correct?
Yes, hypothetically we could have gone to Mangapahu, and we could have gone to, up the river.
Right.
But we made deliberate decisions with respect to the critical mass, cost effectiveness of the service, and targeting concentration areas where more people live.
Thank you.
I'm trying to avoid using
No, I've
rural
got it.
and residential.
And the last wee bit, and I'm done, is in that list of points of factors was whether households were receiving a waste collection service already, which those 2 roads were. So whether it's disruption or narrow roads or no curbs, whatever it is, all those factors were already under consideration under existing private company rubbish collections already going on. Is that right?
That's what I understand, yes. Yep.
Excellent. Good, thank you.
Stuart?
It's escaped me now because it was a little while ago that you asked the question. I think there were different considerations and words used during different parts, because remember we started with a waste plan, which was an idea, and then we went through iterations of long-term plan, amendment, then a long-term plan last year. So there were different words used, and that wasn't the answer that I was going to ask. It was to your first question. I can't remember what you asked, but I'll leave it there.
Yes, if you, you're very welcome to speak, Rob. I think now would be a good time.
Before Rob does that, can I ask just one simple question? In what way can the Whanganui Rural Community Board have input to the decision that Council will make on the 9th of December?
Is this the 3rd of, you mean the 3rd of September?
The 3rd of September will be a council meeting. The Rural Community Board does not have a vote at that table. So I'm asking officers, in what way can the Whanganui Rural Community Board have input into that discussion on the 3rd of September?
Great question, Helen. I guess part of how, in my mind, how they're having input into that is today's discussion, where, as Morgan mentioned earlier, the surveys for that part of the community, well, for those 2 roads, are due back on the 21st of August. We are happy to share through the chair the paper and before the meeting, so that there's a view across the paper and the recommendations. That said, I want to manage some expectations about the results of the survey here, as we will need to on the 3rd of September. That the survey it's not a referendum or a full consultation or anything like that. It is a recheck with a specific part of the community following the petition that was presented to the Ops and Performance Committee. So the recommendations that come through that paper won't focus on the results of the survey, but will focus on the decisions that Council have already made.
And I can't remember, does the Whanganui Rural Community Board have speaking rights at the council meeting?
Yes.
Yes, you do. So
And,
that's...
and I won't be here, so I'm hoping Judd will go along. And
So Judd could do that.
So it's important that Judd sees all the
So at the
all the recommendations.
and we might need to get together again just after the 21st of August, when the paper's prepared, the results of that feedback survey are done and are sent to all the Rural Community Board members. We might need to have a little workshop to come back with our agreement on what the chair or what Judd would say at the table.
So when will you have your recommendations available?
The draft recommendations are available now because, as I said, the results of the survey won't have... The recommendations are not focused on the results of the survey, but I'm happy to loop back, well, we're happy to loop back after the 21st of August when the results are in, and we know what we're talking about with the direction of travel ahead of the 3rd of September.
Okay,
Happy to do that.
If we can see the recommendations and then we can have a little gathering and decide if there's anything we would like to recommend to Council regarding those recommendations, and if it's done at the meeting, it'll be done via Judd. But that gives us the opportunity to do the homework so that Judd knows.
Happy to do that.
Okay, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The important thing for the Community Board, in my opinion, is to represent your constituents. And your constituents have approached you, and you either believe in their case and support it at the council, or you don't. But what I want to raise here today is what really happened when we go back, because Stuart and I were part of it, we were there and we did a lot of these negotiations. And it goes back to 2022. Well, of course, the curbside goes back a long time before that, but 2022 we held the consultation. But prior to that consultation and preparing the documents, there was a lot of discussion which areas were going to be in, which areas would be out. And of course, rural areas, we did have some interest from Westmere to be included in this service. And I can remember speaking with Stuart at our Waste Advisory Group meetings where we discussed these issues, and we said that we wouldn't include the rural areas for a number of reasons. First of all, the safety reasons with the high speed limits and the dangers around that, and the concern of contractors about that with the current services that they're operating in those areas. There are things like the drive-offs, you know, the pull-offs of the road, a vehicle stopping, a big truck like they're having, stopping in those rural areas continuously. And of course, the extra cost of the service that was likely to be borne by the urban sector because of the added costs of servicing an area like Westmere with only a few pickups and quite a distance to travel. So there were all those sort of factors. And we decided that there was not going to be a rural inclusion. In fact, the common term that we used was it went from the cemetery to Ray's garage. And so that included Pickwick Road and Dickens Lane, but it never included Papaiti Road and Waireka Road. And I was quite shocked to see this complaint come in from Papaiti Road, Waireka Road. It turned up and I thought, oh no, this can't be right because they were never in the service. But it turned out they were. So
really, all that history, and it's I still haven't got my head around how they ended up there, because Fordell and Mofanau, apparently they went in because they consulted that they wanted to be in.
Well, see, that is incorrect, David. Here's the document. They were always going to be in when we went out for consultation. The words are the Whanganui urban area and Fordell, Marybank and Mofanau villages. Okay. They were always in the scheme. As for saying that they put in as a result of it, that's simply untrue.
Okay, so if they'd wanted out, they would have done that via the consultation process.
If they had wanted out,
so
yeah.
Waireka,
yeah.
Papaiti, they didn't consult. They didn't use the consultation process to get out of it because they didn't know they were in it.
They didn't. They weren't in it.
Okay. Well, I mean that's all history now, and so we have to clearly learn from that.
So I believe.
But in terms of your comment, sorry, I better let you finish.
No, you carry on.
In terms of your comment that we need to be advocating for these people, I'm very unclear as to what we should be advocating for, because I've talked to Barbara Gray a number of times, and she puts forward a very good case for that area simply not wanting this service. But, and presumably this survey, Sarah, will help. But if somebody offered to pick up all my empty export gold and Chardonnay bottles for $147 a year, I would actually be quite keen on that. So I'm nervous about going in boots and all with Barbara in case we've got a significant portion of that community which actually thinks they're getting a reasonable service for $147 a year. I presume the only way we're going to be able to get a handle on that is your survey, Sarah. So the problem is, Rob, I don't know what we should be advocating for.
So
I think as councillors,
you've had the survey from Barbara, and I think her figures were 69 residents and 66 were against it. I think it was about that.
If that's right, then
there's a bit of info that I have never had yet, and I'm also waiting to the September meeting to figure it out. And I don't know why Papaiti Waireka was included. Was it just like the contract was this big and and it could be, those roads could be included easily, or, you know, like, that's an officer level decision, right? I guess. And what was the driving thing by bringing that street in?
To go back a step before we address that, if we can, two first principles around why council has decided to offer a curbside collection service, and that is to reduce landfill.
Yeah.
So that's the first, you know, principle that we're working towards. And I mentioned earlier that the defined area of the service was defined using factors including critical mass, and by that I mean the number of households. We wouldn't want to be going up and down roads that have got, you know, that are 10 kilometres long, for example, with one house on it. You know, so we were looking to find sensible boundaries for the service where we could achieve those principles of reducing landfill and diverting things as much as possible, achieving the critical mass, acknowledging that they already have those types of services potentially in their area, that the roads were accessible, that we could access them safely, a combination of factors. So running the risk of repeating myself, it's not a straightforward response.
Okay. And I would describe the description of rural versus urban was descriptions. They're not definitions, and people use those words definitions. There is no definition that you used. It is a description, right? And that's, so I just want to, so if because these streets do not want it, and they weren't originally thought that they were in it, why could we not swap out that area and choose another area or street who say we really want it and we don't have it? Because there are actually rural areas that say we really want this, we can't wait till we can have it. So I'm just wondering, is, you know, the cost implication of saying, yeah, you guys just don't have to have it, and we can swap it to somewhere else. You know, that's the sort of thing.
Simply speaking, the time for that has passed. Again, simply speaking, there will be opportunities in the future to revisit. But we, council, has just made a resolution. You know, we've made some decisions to implement the service as contracted, and we've struck rates accordingly. That isn't able to be wound back easily outside of, or if at all, and I'm not an expert on this, outside of rate setting rhythms. So yeah, time for that's passed.
Another year, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Did you have something?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Would you like to?
Yeah, I would like to make a point on this because I moved the resolution. I know what was intended, and we were discussing, as a result of the submission process, we were discussing Bill Simmons's submission on Pickwick Road and Dickens Lane. Papeete Road, Waireka Road, hadn't entered the process at that stage.
I'm not sure.
So when we passed that resolution, we were actually talking about Dickens Lane and Pickwick Road. This issue is another one again.
I was at council when we had that discussion. But in terms of the Rural Community Board, Judd, do you want to?
I just want to add, is there any provisions there to add e-waste to that recycling process, especially for the rurals? You know, we've got
I think I might just butt in there. The whole waste recycling in the rural areas is quite a big issue. I think it is much better coped with in a workshop setting where we've got plenty of time, where we don't have to, we can say what we like without, because we're not online. So I don't know, I hope I'm not overstepping my role as chair by trying to shut that part of the discussion down. And I don't think it's helpful going back over how Waireka Road Papi Iti got involved, how we got to the situation where they were in something and didn't realise they needed to consult to get out of it. But I think, again, that could be part of our discussions with a workshop, just to make sure that does not happen again. I think council's got a real problem trying to decide how to fix this. And I think we've covered that by saying that our little group are going to see the recommendations, and we can make up our own mind as to how we are going to advocate to council on what we think should happen. So I'm hoping that encompasses it all, and that sort of is sufficient for today's discussion. But if anybody's violently unhappy with that, you better say so.
No, but Chair, I'm not violent. On reflection, if we look to the future, the Rural and Community Board has a huge role to play. When you next visit this and extend the service, we need to look in our action role, or the Chair, with due respect, we all need to make sure this is part of the Rural and Community Board's discussions down the future when it's expanding. The analysis of what went right or what went wrong has been done and been well heard by petitioners and councillors and other persons. I personally am looking forward to, in the nicest way, the September meeting, where we can hear the material and the recommendations rather than the blame game. There may be lessons to learn for councillors. There may be lessons to learn for officers with consultation. And that will lead us forward to the next time we expand the service and consult with people. But we as a Rural and Community Board need to be perhaps more in there than we have been up until this point. That's not a criticism, it's an observation. And that's where I'd like to leave my input, Chair.
Thank you. I would like to think that we're on that track already, and you wouldn't know, of course, because I have met with Sarah. And the plan at this stage is to have some in-depth discussions with our board starting probably next month. But it needs to be in a workshop type situation, in my view, so we're not under time pressure, and anybody can say what they like without worrying about other people looking in and perhaps picking up getting the wrong idea of what's going on. So that's my plan, and Sarah and I talked about it for probably half an hour last week. So on that basis, I think we've achieved all we can as a board at this meeting.
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconder? Recommendation up there. Would anyone like to second it? Jenny? Okay. Thank you. So all those in favour, please say aye. And against? Carried. Thank you very much to all the council staff, and we will be seeing you again soon. Thank you, Rob. So item 6.3. 4. Caroline. Thank you for your extensive report.
Hopefully it won't take too long. I won't go through the whole thing, I promise. Hi everyone. So this is an update on our climate change work program. I wanted to share it with you this time around because I thought there was a couple of things that were quite relevant to the rural community that you might be interested in. So some things to note: we've been undertaking a climate change risk assessment focused on council assets. This risk assessment includes waters, infrastructure, transport, roading, and bridges throughout the district, including rural areas, among other things as well that will be included. The purpose of the risk assessment is to inform future climate adaptation planning and investments. So it's close to being complete now, and I will share the report with you once it's finalised. The other relevant thing for you that I'm going to point out is the Community Climate Action Fund is going ahead this year with $50,000 available for climate action projects. Applications will open in September with the exact date to be confirmed, and I've attached a review of the fund, the same one I shared Ops and Performance last week, to the report. And I'm not going to go through that whole slideshow, but just wanted to point out something that I thought you might be interested in that in terms of location, there was an almost even mix between rural and urban projects. So I thought that was a real win for the fund, for our rural community, and something that was pretty cool to share. So the fund will hopefully open in September, we're aiming for, and it would be great if you could share it with your rural community networks and encourage them to apply if you have any community groups. And the fund's going to be included in a broader review of council funding, and elected members will decide what will happen next year with the fund. So you can give us your feedback through that process, hopefully, on how we can help the rural community to apply and take part in community climate action. All right, and that's it for the updates on the report. And I thought I'd move on, unless there's any questions on that, I'll move on to discussing the emissions reduction plan submission. Are there any questions on that first part?
Thanks, Caroline. Just one question, at the risk of sounding a little bit like a certain analytical counsellor, but from a KPI perspective, have you actually tried to gauge the effectiveness of the Climate Action Fund in terms of reduction in carbon emissions?
So we did look at that, but it's too difficult to calculate for this particular community fund because it's a lot of community behaviour change projects. So that's really difficult to calculate exact carbon emission reductions from that. We have put a recommendation in that we improve our reporting templates so we can better capture that kind of data. But again, it's not going to be very accurate. And a fund of this scale, it's not really the goal, so that you're going to have exact numbers of emissions reductions. Yep.
Ross?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report. In your introduction, you said there was a good mix of projects of rural and urban. From a rural and community board perspective, I know this sounds like I'm drilling down, were some of these rural projects devised by urban residents who took it into the rural community, or was it rural community wanting to do rurally based projects? Is that kind of...
They were all based rural, so they were rural organisations. Yeah, there's a list of the organisations in the review that you can see. So they were all actually based where their projects were. There were 2 projects that were floating across the district, so they were probably urban based, but their actual projects would be rural, some of their projects, but the rest were based where they applied from.
So, and part 2, if I might, when we as a council promote this fund and the deadlines, etc., I'm assuming we use the internet and so on. Is there anything different to that kind of broad advertising that you use to target rural people? Are there agencies or stakeholders that you have reached out to, and then they pass it on to, like Federated Farmers, and they pass it on to their people? Do you have that kind of networking, or is it just largely a generic advertisement promotion?
Yeah, largely we've just done it generically, which is why it's awesome that it's been able to reach rural communities.
Yes.
We haven't done anything particularly special to reach them, so that's been a really positive outcome.
Excellent, thank you.
So we probably need to be quite vigilant here in that picking up any issues in this space which are particularly relevant to the rural community. So if any of you have ideas or spot things in that regard, you'd better let the rest of us know.
Mr Chair, I just wanted to suggest that we refer this particular item to the workshop as an action item to discuss how we're going to spread the word.
Yep. So, okay. Thank you. Yes, I think this is help get this on our agenda big time.
Cool.
Thank
And
you.
so, yep.
That's right. No.
Yep, I'm just moving on to the emissions reduction plan number 2 submission. Yesterday I sent a first draft of our council submission, and hopefully you've managed to have a look at that. So the emissions reduction plan, the second one, the plan shows how the government plans to meet emissions reduction targets for the years 2026 to 2030. So things I wanted to check in with you all. Do you want to submit on this as the Rural Community Board? And your options would be you can either sign the council's submission alongside council or write a separate submission that has more of a focus on rural issues, because obviously the council covers a broader range of urban issues as well. And of course, any comments on the draft, of course, you can send those to me over email if they're going to be more longer, I guess, more technical.
Chair, is there time for us, similar to what Councillor Helen was saying, that may well be one of our workshops, if there's time to workshop that as well? I don't think it's a difficult one.
The submission's due next Wednesday, so it's probably not time for a workshop. Usually we send it out via, if it's not a particularly contentious topic, we send our submissions out via email for comment.
So, with respect, if you're suggesting the time is short, would you be hinting that we co-sign on this occasion?
It's totally up to you all. Yeah, I'm not hinting anything.
I don't know whether have you seen it? It's.
We haven't got the draft, have we?
Yes, it's here.
Oh, sorry.
Mine only arrived yesterday, so I'm not sure that I'd have to have a think about it. I'm not sure that I agree with it all, but I do note with the pine tree issue that that particular aspect sort of lines up with what Horizons are suggesting for the region in terms of improving our river water quality. So, which I don't think the farming community is all that impressed with. So, as you can see, it gets quite complex. But perhaps if you, how should we cope with this?
Mr. Sorry.
Yes, Helen?
Mr. Chair, I'm just, Colleen, you've writing a submission on this, or you have written one, right? Yeah.
Okay.
You want to sit at the table, Colleen? You're very welcome to sit at the table rather than the back chairs, considering we've got an empty
Happy
room
to hide
anyway.
in the back chairs, but
You
would hate the room to be too big.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is some opportunities to put your own one in, as Caroline has said, and from an agri point of view, as well as a rural community point of view, that is a good option. Particularly as I did find the LGNZ one quite urban focused. With a lack of mention of urban ngāhere or anything, so it was, that's actually not present in your one, so it'd be quite good to add that. But yeah.
So it's whether or not we do that. Colleen would email us her version, and whether or not individually we sort of responded to that, and you co-signed it, or you get together for a little quick powwow.
Certainly, if we can get any comments on Colleen's and the one that we've got here. I'm not sure that I really want to co-sign the one that
council have done.
that we've got here.
And I do think we should be making relative comment to council's one, if we don't agree with what council is going to submit, we need to tell them that. So understanding what Colleen has inputted and understanding what is doing separately and understanding what council is and then feeding back and deciding what we do. But I wouldn't be happy that council just willy-nilly, and I don't mean that in any way, but you know, like this rural community board should have input into what council is suggesting,
But
let alone
when
put
you
in
look
our own.
through this, I find it hard to believe that all 12 of you councillors would just want to just sign that off.
No.
So presumably this, that would be right, that there'll be input from councillors on this.
Yeah, they'll
This is a
be
draft,
sent out. Yeah.
to get the discussion going.
Yes, that's correct.
But it doesn't mean that they've got time to do it or they've got that inside knowledge into rural. So this is a key role for this board, is to consider council submission and feedback to council. This is what we think you should do.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're going to have to have a meeting before next Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I did do a bit of work last year on this before obviously the current consultation.
Yeah.
Because the impact of forestry on, for instance, sheep and beef farms. So yeah, there was a bit of work done on that. So we could probably draw some of that.
So we probably need to have a little gathering of those that are interested. If you're not interested, that's fine, and hopefully include Colleen. And
Well, we'd have to, I think.
and Judd, Judd's got a good idea. We'll incorporate that.
So we're going to have that in the next couple of days because before Wednesday.
I was thinking of Monday. How do Mondays go for people?
Colleen, are you free on Monday?
Monday's good.
Hey?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm fairly free except 1 to 2.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, Diane's had some experience in this process before, and might be able to offer some insight on how we can capture the views and get them circulated timely. So I'm just wondering if you'd like to offer some advice.
Simply what we did last time, the board made a submission.
Thank you, Anna. What we did last time, the board made a submission on gun registration or something like that, was there was no time to meet before the deadline for the submission. So those members, rural board members who were interested in submitting, sent me their comments. I wrote it up, circulated it, or gave it to David for his approval, and then I circulated it for the board's comment and approval, and the board gave David permission, authority to sign it on the board's behalf. So that's another option as well.
Yeah.
Which I'd be willing to pull together your comments if that made it easier.
Another one, I wrote most of it, and with presumably Diane's help, we tidied it up. But I don't feel particularly on top of this issue. So I feel a little bit out of my depth.
Yeah, look, I'm very confident, and with Colleen's background and with what council have submitted, I think we pull those two together. We have a meeting on Monday because, you know, I think in an hour we can deal with it, go through the main points, pick out the bits we agree, don't agree with, and then we can probably leave it with democracy.
Yes.
So those who are interested, tell us now, I guess, and we'll pull you together for that little meeting on Monday.
And if you don't want to come on Monday,
no big deal. Yeah.
Just provide us with any thoughts.
Yeah.
Because we don't really want to be too imposing and having you running in and out from meetings all the time. Okay, I'm happy with that.
Okay. So could democracy send out a meeting?
So after the meeting, we'll just discuss a time and.
Yeah, cool.
And Caroline, so was there anything else you wanted to?
Nope, that's it, thank you.
You've generated some more work, so well done.
So Caroline, could you just send me that email again with that council submission?
Yes, it's going to go out to all of council soon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I've got a copy, thank you. Yep.
Okay, so I will ask from a mover and a seconder then that the Whanganui Rural Community Board receive the report Climate Change Work Programme Update. So mover, please. Helen. Second. Ross. All in favour? Against? That's carried.
Thank you for the report. Very much appreciated.
Yes, thank you, Caroline. That's that's very good.
Thank you.
So there was just a couple of other things I was just going to tack on. That's the end of the published agenda, isn't it? So there was just a couple of things before Judd does the karakia. Bill, you had an update on an issue you were dealing with?
I do. Thank you, Chair. Fordale School has a school bus run, and it has a drop-off and pick-up point on the number 2 line that it's becoming an issue. I'll cite the drop-off point specifically for you, so in case you know roughly where it is. If you go out through Jerry Hill and on the number 2 line, about 7k out, you'll pass a church on your right. That's the Matarawa Church. You'll go down a dip and then up onto a relatively long straight. Must be, be at least 1 kilometre long. And halfway along that straight is the school drop-off and pick-up points. I've contacted the principal of the school. I'll just read out her email. That's all right.
The house we're talking about is the Mayor's uncle. There's today's piece of useless information for you.
That's right. That's John Tripe's home, right outside. Yes, the stopping, because I suggested perhaps an alternative site. Yes, the stopping at Matarawa Church was ruled out as the bus needs to have a minimum of 200 metres clear view of cars so it can turn around. And it was deemed that this area does not provide long enough clear view. I asked and they looked into it and came back to the same place being the safest, that is John Tripe's place, the safest for drop-off and pick-up. I also suggested about some signage perhaps. I have also pushed for slow down signs for the times you have suggested, because it would be a limited time where the bus is there. And given we were told that this was outside the budget, we have been given the opportunity to have a sign on the back of the bus reminding people to slow down. However, my thoughts are that by the time they see the sign, it's probably too late. I watch people in cars most mornings just speeding past the secondary school bus and not slowing down while it picks up students at the Matarawa corner. We would love to have the Rural Board support and look at getting signage along number 2 line. So that's from the principal, Fordale School. So that's their position. I was just talking to Michael prior to this, and he, I think, has got the solution.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can I raise a point of order, please? Bill, this is not about your report, it's a valid topic. This is not on the agenda and formally should not be heard here. This should be referred to our workshop, and from there we can actually refer it through the next process, and it could well be then we can ask for an officer's report in response to come back to the next meeting.
Okay, well, now that it's been raised, can we move along those lines?
It can go to the workshop.
So Helen's right. So it's a minor matter on the agenda, so we can have a focus area update, and then the next step would be that we refer it to deal with it in its entirety, whether it's at a workshop or, and then maybe you might request an officer report following that. So at this point, it's simply an update, and then we can take away as an action, and then it'll appear on a workshop or an agenda.
That's why I got Bill to bring it up now.
Yeah.
So now we know there's an issue. Can we just decide on what we do next?
Well, it would need a report from officers, wouldn't it?
So I'll take it away as a action for the workshop, and then from there, you can direct us to what you want to do next, in terms of an agenda, or how you want to look at it from that perspective.
I know this is awkward, but this is an official meeting of the Whanganui Rural Community Board, which has got standing orders. And decisions on an item that's not in the agenda cannot really be dealt with, and it's certainly not an appropriate way to deal with them here. You know, restrict these meetings to, we need to make a decision or receive a report, boof, you know, like we've just done. A new item should be brought through through our workshops, or, you know, you will get it ahead of time and have directed it, so by the time it comes with a full report and background, and we're not sitting here out of the cold saying, what's this all about? I need, you know, you're going, it's a process, and I'm sorry to hold up.
I'll sort that out with Anna, because we'll try and get these issues raised before the meetings, so we know what action we are going to take at the meeting.
Correct.
Okay, right. Anna and I will sort that out.
Sorry, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. We are now all very clear that there's an issue, and we will bring it back. But even before it comes back, I think we'll find out what options there are, so that when it comes back, we will be discussing it with some options.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bill.
So and so just reiterate, anybody's got anything that they want to discuss, try and bring it through to the workshop. And that we can talk about anything then, even if it's just at the last minute, but ideally go through the chair and make sure things are brought up on the agenda so all the background work can be done.
So I was driving past this place a few days ago, and I thought, oh, that doesn't look very good. No. And so I rang Bill, and so this has only just happened in the last few days.
Oh, great.
Okay, any other board members got anything they would like to update the meeting on with their activities? Brian Doughty, he's I think he might be chair of the Rural Support Trust. Was he a member? Anyway, he reports that they've been active and they've done a really good. They put on a show, the Bitches Box, I think it was called, and they had a fantastic turnout to a very.
I presume they're talking about dogs.
There was a bit of an overlap. He said it was quite raunchy, but there were two.
I think we'll have to edit this and take this conversation offline.
But it was two. But the point is, it was organised by the Rural Support Trust, and it got 200 people. So it was a very successful.
It's enough worth rolling out to other districts, other rural districts. If it's got 200 people turned up.
Yeah. So has anybody else got anything they would like to report on? Otherwise...
I was just going to ask, in terms of the conference coming up, so there's a Local Government New Zealand conference next week, which I'm going to attend from behalf of council, as well as the mayor, and there's one other, Councillor Charlotte. And Judd, you're going for the community board portion of that. It's got its own little conference, so that'll be great. And there's a lot happening in that, right? So it'd be good to get well, obviously you'll do a report when you get back from that, but.
So it'd be more appropriate that comes to the workshop too?
No, the report on that could come, well, whatever.
Yeah,
that's up to Judd.
Yeah, okay. That's all I've got, so I shall now declare the meeting closed and ask Judd for a karakia.
Certainly. Karakia wakamutanga. Unuhia ki te uru tapanui. Kia watia kia mama te naka te tinana. Te waira i te ara takatu, ko ia rā e rongo waka irihia ake ki runga. Kia wate, ku wate, hau, pai Māori e. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Judd.